10 seconds or so. Yeah. Okay. So I want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. This is our third time together. And today is the first one where I don't have any specific agenda. I know many of you have questions and concerns on different things that you've received in the mail, different things you've read in the media outlets, as well as the issues that are going before the court. Most recently, the Rhode Island Attorney General, my motion to compel him last week, and then tomorrow is my motion to compel the diocese in a similar fashion. So I'm here tonight. I'll give you kind of a few bullet points of things that seem to have caused confusion that I provided, that I want to provide you guys with some clarification, answer any questions on, and then I'm happy to answer questions on any issue that you have questions or concerns about. And as always, I will be as candid as possible. And if I can't answer the question, I will tell you I can't answer the question. And if I can, I'll do my best to give you as complete and accurate an answer as I possibly can. So first, many of you received notice from me in the mail when I was appointed permanent receiver for the plan. And in connection with that mailing, there was something called a proof of claim form. That proof of claim form, quite simply, is not for you. You do not need to fill that out in any way, shape, or form and send it back. I know you exist. I know that you are vested in the plan. If you've been receiving mail from me, you know that I know that. And I am not going to expect any of you to try to determine how much money you are owed under this plan. That claim form is for what I'm going to refer to as other third parties that are not individuals like yourself. They're not vested plan holders, plan participants, who believe, rightly or wrongly, that they are owed money from either St. Joe's, the hospital, or the retirement plan. So to the extent that you had a question about how to fill that out, how you get the information, for everybody in this room and anybody who is a participant who may be watching this video when it gets posted, you can take that form and you can throw it out. You do not need to fill it out. It does not need to cause any stress for you. Just discard it, and we will move on from there. In addition to that, I also sent out what I termed a survey. As everybody knows, when we were here at the last meeting, we talked about whether or not groups should be formed, whether or not it should be one group, things of that nature. Based on the feedback that I got at that meeting, which there was many who spoke were in favor of no groups. Some who I spoke to afterwards were in favor of some type of a group. I decided that rather than wait to see what happens, because as I've stated before, time is not on our side here, especially with February approaching, I decided to poll each of you and see who was interested in serving on a committee, and then asked for some information where I could possibly try to get as diverse of a group as I possibly could to serve on that advisory committee. The deadline for sending those in technically was Friday. I've received probably between those forms as well as those of you who signed up, I believe it was at our second meeting, probably about 40, 45 individuals. I've got probably about 10 spots to fill. So what I've done is I've tried to break out the information you've given me into groups, like I said, that will be as diverse of a selection from each of you as possible. And I'm going to randomly pick from each one of those groups to try to create this committee. The union is going to provide some membership of that committee. Arlene Violet's group is going to provide membership to that committee. There have been two groups that have been formed thus far that I'm aware of. They're going to be providing some membership to that committee, and then it's going to be rounded out with the individuals who filled out those forms. Those committees are not carved in stone, so just because you're on the committee or I select you to be on the committee this time doesn't mean that nobody else will ever get a chance. There will be people coming on or off. It also doesn't mean that I'm not willing to hear your input on it. It's just, obviously, with a committee, I'd love to have all 2,729 of you participating, but as you could imagine, that would probably be unwieldy in terms of trying to come to a consensus if we are, in fact, able to come to a consensus. And just to be clear, that advisory committee, in particular, is a committee that is going to be assembled that I am going to use to try to assist me to come up with, one, ideas as to what can be done with this pension to protect it for each of you under the circumstances that we have, and two, to try to come to a consensus once we identify those options. I am hopeful, but it would not surprise me if I'm not able to come to a consensus with everybody who sits at that table. And it is, if that happens, if I'm not able to come to a consensus, then I will have to, on my own, with, I guess, going on what I believe and the majority at the table believe is maybe the most equitable route, we'll be making a recommendation to the court, and then any individual or group of individuals that wishes to express a differing opinion to the court can do so at the time that I file the petition. So I'm hopeful that I will go to the court and say, I've sat down with this group, they represent all of you, and we are all in agreement that at least for now, this will be the adjustment on the benefits. But if not, I'll have to make a decision based on the conversations with that advisory committee and present something to the court in February. Excuse me. In addition to that, I'm going to first address the motions that have been recently filed. The motion on last Wednesday against the Rhode Island Attorney General, seeking to compel him to produce documents related to this plan, and then the motion that is scheduled for tomorrow against the diocese, compelling the diocese and the bishop to provide information relative to this plan. The result of the hearing on last Wednesday against the Rhode Island Attorney General, as I'm sure you may have read in media outlets, was the judge was concerned with the lack of information that had been provided over the past 30 days since the Rhode Island Attorney General had been provided with the subpoena, and questioned how much staffing the Rhode Island Attorney General did in fact put towards providing that information. And at the conclusion of that hearing, the judge directed a couple of things. One, he directed that the Rhode Island Attorney General provide the documents that I requested via subpoena no later than January 15th. In addition, he directed the parties, me and the Attorney General, to sit together to work out a workable plan for what's called electronic discovery. So any electronic data that can't be handed over in a physical copy, but you need to make sure that my computer has the same program that their computer has so that I can access it when they provide it. The other thing he did, because he did not want, and he specifically stated this, he did not want to hear that the documents were all being produced on, say, January 14th. So he directed that the 15th be the deadline, but that the documents be providing on what's called a rolling basis. So as the Attorney General has some documents, send them over. Don't wait to send them all at once. And he wants the parties, more in particular, I believe, the Attorney General, to provide a weekly update, written update to the court as to the status of the compilation and delivery of those documents. So based on that, we should have everything that we need by the 15th, except what the Attorney General is going to deem to be what's called privileged. If the Attorney General believes that something is privileged, then he has to provide what's called a privilege lock. basically a list of everything that he does not want to produce based on some theory of privilege. And then that issue will be dealt with by the court, me, and the Attorney General sometime after the 15th. But at the very least, that list has to be provided by the 15th, and all documents that are not on that list need to be provided by the 15th. We have a motion tomorrow, very similar circumstances, where we've asked for documents from the diocese. And similar to the Rhode Island Attorney General, we haven't received any documents from the diocese. So we filed a motion to compel them. That hearing is tomorrow. Some papers were filed early this morning from the diocese, which, quite frankly, did not have enough time to provide a written response to, but I advised the court that we will be responding orally at the hearing. While I cannot speak for the court, and I do not know ultimately what will happen, I am hopeful that the results will be similar in terms of the court directing them to turn over everything that we're asking for. I'm also hopeful that the court will view, both based on volume and role, the diocese's role as being much different, and therefore shorten the time frame for the diocese to get those documents to me. But in any event, I would be, if the judge grants the relief that I'm asking, I'd be surprised if he extended it beyond the 15th that he set for the Attorney General. It probably is not the last time you'll see a motion like this filed. We may be filing other motions based on information we think that they should have provided and that they didn't, wasn't in a privilege log or things like that. But this is all part of the court process. I'm not happy with the delay. I'm not happy with having to go in to compel. I'm not happy with having not received even one piece of paper in the past 30 days. But it's, while it's disappointing, I can't exactly say that I'm shocked by it either. Just so you are aware as well, when the order appointing me permanent was filed, there was a section of that order that I had included, paragraph 6, for those of you who want to take a look at it, which states that anybody involved with the plan directly has to preserve and turn everything over to me. And the reason I did that is the AG was not directly involved with the plan. The diocese arguably was, but other individuals or groups, such as the investment manager, the actuary, St. Joe's themselves, I don't need to subpoena those documents. I've got a court order right now that says that they need to turn them over, and if they don't, instead of going in on a motion to compel, I'll be going in on a motion to adjudge them in contempt, which is violation of a court order. So you may be seeing that as well. There's no instance right now that warrants that, and hopefully there won't be, but I can't speak for further down the road, depending on what I receive, or more importantly, what I don't receive. Beyond that, I did want to address at least the article that was in Go Local today. I want to explain that a little bit. As most of you know, because you've read it, you've heard about it, when St. Joe's filed the petition seeking to appoint a receiver, it indicated that the pension was underfunded by approximately $43 million. That number was based on a calculation which included what's called a rate of return, so the amount of investment income that the plan would anticipate to receive based on its investments on average over the next 40 to 45 years. That rate of return was 7.75%. That's not an imprudent number. It might be a little high, but it's not an imprudent number for an active pension plan that is receiving regular contributions. I do not believe that rate of return is a prudent rate of return for a plan that, as we sit here today, we hope we will have money to put into that plan. But as of right now, we do not have any annual contributions going into the plan. Because of that, I believe the rate of return needs to be much lower. When you lower the rate of return, just to use simple math, if I cut the rate of return in half, that roughly will double the monetary need I have going forward. So if I were to cut the 7.75% down to somewhere in the high threes, then that would mean that $43 million would double to approximately $86 million, roughly. The $125 million that I have identified is based on the fact that at 3%, which is not as low as some have suggested that this plan be, but not as high as others may have suggested it be, is about 150% lower than the 7.75%. If you take that $43 million and you increase it by 150%, that puts you in between $100 and $125 million. That's where that number came up with. That does not mean a couple of things. It doesn't mean anybody took $125 million out of the pension. It also doesn't mean that there was supposed to be $125 million as we sit here today. That money is a calculation of how much money I believe this plan would need based on a rate of return of 3%, assuming 3% interest every year. That would allow this plan to pay each of you 100% for the next 40, 45 years, however long this pension should live, with the last vested holder receiving their last check. That's where that came from. So it's a prospective number, but because we know we're not receiving annual contributions, I have to come up with a present value cash today that I'd be able to put into the plan, assume interest calculations going forward to keep the plan alive and pay everybody 100%. It's confusing, it's complicated, but I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea from the article, because you've heard 43 million, now you're hearing 125, and some people are like, how did it go from 43 to 125 just in 2.5 months? That's how it got there, is because I'm changing the numbers. I'm changing the factors that were used to come up with that $43 million number. With that, I think that's about all kind of the introductory things that I wanted to just touch base with you on. And now I'm happy to answer any questions on any of that, or quite frankly, anything else that you have questions on or concerns. I will say, actually, one last thing. There is a group that has formed. I said that there were a couple of groups that have formed. There is one group here tonight, or their counsel is here, as well as members of that group, and I think they want to identify themselves, make just a quick identification of who they are, what their thought process is, meaning what type of factors bind that group together. That way, if anybody here wants to explore joining that group as a common voice, you'll have the opportunity to do that tonight, and I'll give them the opportunity to introduce themselves to you and do that. Okay? With that, I'm going to open up the floor. I'd ask that if you're going to speak, go up to the microphone so everybody can hear what you're asking or saying.
Hi, my name's Doreen.
Hi, Doreen.
And I'm with that group that you just spoke about. At the last meeting, a group of us gathered at the corner of the stage and decided we were going to have a meeting to try to organize a group for the majority of people that were not represented, who were not in Arlene Violet's group, and who were not covered by the union representation. So with that, 30 of us have been meeting on a weekly basis and volunteering our time and organizing a group. We have an attorney that we've acquired, and we need to get people to sign on with us. The idea is that we believe that there should be one deduction for everyone, and that is what we're forming the group with. And We are open to any suggestions or comments, and we have been well represented by not every, but a good number of departments within the hospital. It's not just nursing, it's finance, and it's the librarian, and it's other areas in the hospital. So we'd like to help, because I felt that we were orphaned and that we had no one to represent us, and how would I alone hire an attorney? That was so confusing to me. So I feel very comfortable with this group. A lot of smart people are on it, and we all care about the same thing, that we want an equal division of any cuts for everyone.
And if I could, just from what I understand from the group, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's exactly the binding piece for this group, is that the members of this group, regardless of what your position was at the hospital, regardless of whether you're receiving benefits or not, regardless of your age, your group is looking at a uniform cut across, to the extent there is a cut, that you want that cut to be equal against every single participant across the board. No graduated or staging or anything like that. Just so that everybody's clear, that's how I understand it. And I'd ask if you could identify either yourself and some others, maybe after the meeting.
Yeah.
You can find a spot in the room, and people who have questions or interested.
I just wanted to say that the biggest obstacle is communication. And we formed a Facebook site that is one group, St. Joseph's. And we hope that you will visit the site and get any information we can share with you. And so the cost of mailing is astronomical. We could never afford to do that on our own. So we're asking that if you're in the middle and don't have any representation, that you consider joining us so that we can have numbers to prove that we are the majority.
I'm just going to add to what Doreen is saying. I'm Robin Lynch. I worked for St. Joe's in Fatima for 15 years. I am still currently working, vested, eligible for retirement, but frozen. We are a diverse group. There's about 30 of us in the group. You have a list of names on the letters that we passed out earlier. We are asking, although we've hired an attorney to represent us, that you not contact that attorney directly, that you work through us, because we're going to collate the questions and get answers back to you through our Facebook One. We also have an email address that will advertise and get out to you, so you can communicate to us that way. In addition to what we talked about the basic premise, the philosophy of the group is that no matter what group that we belong to, that there's equal reduction across the board, and that we're looking for the diverse membership. We would like you to sign up today. Pass your application. I shouldn't say it's an application, it's a membership form at the front in the lobby, because what we're doing is we're going to collate those, and we're going to give not only numbers to Mr. DeSesto, but also the classifications he asked for: vested, a collecting pension, frozen, whatnot, at this particular point, if that makes sense. We do have a post office box. Doreen has established the Facebook site for us for communications. We have an email that's been put together by John, who's our chairperson of our committee, Brigette, and I'm trying to think what else. We're looking for membership on the advisory. We believe we have 2 members, our attorney as well as chairperson at this point, hopefully more representation. And what have I forgotten? I think that's probably it. We will ask that you please fill out the application and pass it in at the end. If you don't get a chance to do it tonight, please mail it or send it to the Facebook site. Go ahead, shoot. Please. Facebook site is, I'm going to let Doreen, where are you? Yeah, One Group St. Joseph. To become a member of the site, because it is a closed group, we ask that you would friend one of us on that list. If you friend us, we'll add you to the group. Or if you want to email us or let us know, we'll contact you. Yeah, our email is onegroupstjoseph@gmail.com. Sorry, I can't remember that at the top of my head.
So that's onegroupstjosephs@gmail.com.
At gmail.com, and hold on, Sue.
So St. Joseph or St. Joseph's? St. Joseph. stjoseph.com.
Yeah. Sue River just pointed out, not the number 1, but the word one. O-N-E. No, it's the one that John has. It's the one that we put together. And we paid for at this particular point. So. That's in the middle of discussion right now, and we're not paying out of pocket as it stands right now. That's in a negotiation.
I think, if I may, I think we should hold the questions about this group to after the group. This is Mr. Del Sesto's meeting and not our meeting, so...
Well, it's your meeting.
Well, it's not...
It's your meeting, yes.
So what we'll do, if you have any questions, we'll be there at the end, at the corner, at the end of this meeting. Thank you very much.
That's the question is what's the answer about whether or not the lawyer is getting paid or how the lawyer is getting paid? As of, I can't speak for the group. But as of right now, there's nothing. In order for an attorney to get paid from this proceeding, there has to be a motion made requesting that happen. There's no motion pending right now. So I can't speak to, the question can be answered by the group. I don't know what the compensation structure is. All I can tell you is that if any attorney wishes to, not just this group's, but any attorney wishes to get paid from the estate, there needs to be a motion made to the court, and then it's the court's discretion as to whether or not that should be allowed. And there's nothing that's been filed at this point. There are 2 lawyers that I'm aware of right now that have been engaged on some level. I'm not privy to the actual terms of the engagement because that's something being done independent. But as I stated, there has been no motion filed seeking compensation. So I don't know if, I'm going to assume that they intend to, but at this point in time, I don't know if that's the case.